The message came on a quiet Tuesday morning. It traveled through the quantum relay station that floated in the cold darkness near Neptune. Admiral Catherine Cole stood alone at the observation deck of Earth's Orbital Command. She was a woman of 62 years, with gray hair cut short and hands that had seen decades of service. Behind her, the blue curve of Earth glowed softly through the reinforced glass. She read the holographic text that floated in the air before her. The words were formal and cold. The Galactic Council of 12 Systems hereby summons the species known as humanity to appear before the High Assembly. Her aide, Lieutenant Daniel Perry, walked up beside her. He was young, nervous, and still learning how to hide his emotions. He failed at it now. "Ma'am, this is the first direct communication we've received from the Council in 97 years, he said. Catherine nodded slowly. She remembered learning about first contact as a child. The Karathi ship had appeared near Mars, observed humanity for 3 months, and then left without a single word. After that, the galactic community had ignored Earth completely. Humanity was too young, too small, too unimportant. Until now. "Get me a secure line to the President," Catherine said, "and wake up the Joint Chiefs. All of them." 3 weeks later, the diplomatic vessel Endurance launched from Earth's orbital shipyard. It was not a warship, but it carried enough armor to survive a few hits if things went badly. Ambassador Patricia Lane stood at the bridge, watching the stars stretch into lines as the ship entered faster than light travel. Patricia was 54 years old, with brown skin and calm eyes that never seemed to blink when she was thinking hard. She had spent 30 years negotiating treaties between nations that hated each other. She had talked warlords into surrendering. She had convinced enemies to shake hands. But this was different. This was not human politics. This was something far bigger. Her senior advisor, Marcus Webb, stood beside her. He was a thin man with glasses and a mind that worked like a computer. He had memorized everything humanity knew about the Council species. It was not much. "The Karathi hegemony controls the Council," Marcus said quietly. "They have ruled for 10,000 years. They see themselves as the natural leaders of the galaxy. And they see us as what?" Patricia asked. "Insects, probably. Or children. Or both." The journey took 11 days. When the Endurance finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel, Patricia felt her breath catch in her throat. The Nexus was enormous. It was a space station built around a dying red star, so large that Earth could have fit inside it 100 times. Ships from dozens of species flew around it like bees around a hive. Patricia had seen images, but images could not capture the scale of it. This was the seat of galactic power. This was where the fate of species was decided. The council chamber was even more impressive. It was designed to make visitors feel small. 12 massive platforms rose in a circle around a lowered central floor. Each platform held representatives from one of the council species. They looked down at the humans like judges looking at criminals. Patricia walked to the center of the floor with Marcus and a small security team. She kept her back straight and her face calm. She would not let them see fear. The High Arbiter of the Karathi hegemony spoke first. His name was Zethvan, and he was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and eyes that held no warmth. His voice was translated by a device that made his words sound flat and mechanical. "Humanity," he said. "You have expanded into 17 star systems without council authorization. You have established military installations in neutral space. You have violated 47 provisions of the Galactic Compact." Patricia had expected this. She kept her voice steady. "With respect, High Arbiter, humanity never signed the Galactic Compact. We were not invited to." A wave of murmurs passed through the chamber. The council members looked at each other with expressions of surprise and annoyance. Clearly, They were not used to being challenged. Another counselor spoke. This one was called Krytak, and he was insectoid, with a hard shell and mandibles that clicked when he talked. Ignorance of law is not a defense, he said sharply. The penalty for such violations is severe. However, the council is prepared to offer clemency. Patricia raised an eyebrow. And what would clemency require? Zethvin's thin lips curved into something that might have been a smile. It was not a friendly expression. 60% of your annual industrial output for the next 300 cycles. Reduction of your military forces by 80%. Surrender of your colony rights in the Vega Corridor. And placement of council observers on your homeworld. The chamber fell silent. Every eye was on the human ambassador. Patricia understood now. This was not diplomacy. This was extortion. The council did not want to talk to humanity. They wanted to own humanity. They wanted to strip Earth of its wealth, its military, its freedom. They wanted to turn humans into servants. She thought about the billions of people back home. The children playing in parks. The workers in factories. The families sitting down to dinner. None of them knew that their future was being decided in this alien chamber, light years away from everything they loved. Marcus touched her arm gently. It was a signal they had agreed on. It meant, stay calm, gather information. Do not commit to anything. Patricia took a breath. These are significant demands, she said carefully. I will need to consult with my government before providing a formal response. Zethvin waved a long-fingered hand dismissively. You have 30 standard days. After that, the council will assume that humanity has chosen defiance. And defiance has consequences. The threat hung in the air like poison. Patricia bowed her head slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Then she turned and walked out of the chamber, her team following behind her. When they were back aboard the Endurance and safely in faster-than-light travel, Marcus finally spoke. They want to enslave us. They're not even trying to hide it. Patricia stared out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. No, she said quietly. They're not. They think we're too weak to refuse. Too scared to fight back. Are we? Patricia was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to face her advisor, and there was something hard in her eyes. Something that had been forged in 30 years of dealing with tyrants and bullies. I don't know, she said. But I know one thing. We're not going to roll over. Not without a fight. Not without showing them who we really are. The Endurance flew on through the darkness, carrying its small crew back toward a planet that would soon have to make the hardest choice in its history. The United Council of Nations met in emergency session, 12 hours after Ambassador Patricia Lane's report reached Earth. The Assembly Hall Inn. Geneva was packed with representatives from every nation on the planet. Guards stood at every door. The windows had been darkened for security. The air was thick with tension and fear. President Samuel Green sat at the head of the main table. He was a man of 60 years, with tired eyes and a face that carried the weight of impossible decisions. He had been president for 6 years. He had dealt with economic crises, natural disasters, and political conflicts. But nothing had prepared him for this. Let me make sure I understand, he said slowly. The Galactic Council wants 60% of everything we produce. They want us to destroy 80% of our military. They want our colonies. And they want to put their people on Earth to watch us. Patricia nodded. She had not slept since returning. Dark circles hung under her eyes. That is correct, Mr. President, and they gave us 30 days to accept. Or what? They did not say exactly, but the threat was clear. They have 50,000 warships. We have less than 200. General Victor Patel leaned forward. He was the head of Earth's combined military forces, a man who had spent his entire life preparing for wars he hoped would never come. This is not a negotiation, he said bluntly. This is a demand for surrender. If we accept these terms, we stop being an independent species. We become property. Secretary of State Linda Morrison pulled up a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. Human space was a tiny blue dot in one corner. Council space covered almost everything else. The difference in scale was terrifying. The numbers don't lie, she said. Even if we threw everything we have at them, we would lose. It would not even be close. Their technology is more advanced. Their resources are unlimited. Their population is measured in trillions. President Green rubbed his eyes. So you're saying we should accept? I'm saying we need to be realistic about our options. Christopher Dunn, Director of Intelligence, cleared his throat. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke in meetings. When he did, people listened. Mr. President, there's something else you need to know. We've been studying the Council's history since first contact. In the past 600 years, they have made similar demands to 37 emerging species. And what happened to those species? Every single one accepted the terms. They thought they had no choice. They calculated the odds and decided that survival under Council rule was better than destruction. Dunn paused. None of them exist as independent civilizations today. Some were absorbed into larger empires. Some were used as labor forces. A few simply disappeared from historical records entirely. The room went very quiet. Green stood up and walked to the window. He pushed a button, and the darkening faded away, revealing the city below. Geneva sparkled with lights. Cars moved through streets. People walked on sidewalks, completely unaware of the conversation happening above them. 8 billion people, Green said softly, plus another 2 billion in the colonies. That's 10 billion human beings whose futures depend on what we decide in this room. Admiral Catherine Cole appeared on a holographic screen. She was still at orbital command, watching Earth's defense grid and the empty space beyond it. Mr. President, may I speak? Go ahead, Admiral. Sir, I spent 40 years in the military. I've studied every conflict in human history. And I've spent the last 2 decades preparing for exactly this moment. She paused. The Council has numbers. They have technology. They have resources we cannot match. But they have never fought a species like us. What do you mean? Every species that surrendered to them did so because they believed resistance was impossible. They did the math. They looked at the odds. And they chose survival over freedom. Cole's eyes were hard. But humans don't always do the math. We have a long history of fighting wars we cannot win, of standing up against impossible odds, of choosing death over slavery. Morrison shook her head. With respect, Admiral, this isn't ancient history. This isn't 300 soldiers and a mountain pass. This is the survival of our entire species. Is it? Cole asked. Because from where I'm sitting, survival under Council rule doesn't look much like living. It looks like a slow death. A death of everything that makes us who we are. Green turned back to face the room. His expression had changed. The tiredness was still there, but something else had appeared beneath it. Something harder. What do you have in mind, Admiral? Cole allowed herself a small smile. Sir, we've been preparing for this for 40 years. Secret programs. Hidden facilities. Weapons that officially don't exist. We knew this day would come eventually. We knew that sooner or later someone out there would try to take what's ours. And you think we can win? Honestly? Probably not. But I think we can make them pay a price so high that they'll think twice. I think we can show them that some things are more expensive than they're worth. The room was silent as everyone processed her words. Finally, Green spoke. How long would you need to prepare? We're already prepared, sir. We've been ready for years. All we need is the order. Green looked around the room at the faces of the men and women who would help him make this decision. Some looked scared. Some looked determined. Some looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. "I want options on my desk in 6 hours," he said. "Everything. Every scenario. Every weapon. Every strategy. And I want to know exactly what we're risking." He turned to Patricia. "Ambassador, I want you to draft a response to the council. Polite, professional, and absolutely clear that we will not be accepting their terms." Patricia's eyes widened slightly. "You're sure, Mr. President?" Green walked back to the window and looked out at the lights of humanity below. "No," he admitted. "I'm not sure of anything. But I know that I will not be the president who sold our species into slavery. Whatever comes next, we face it standing up." He turned to face the room one final time. "Draft the response. Tell them we decline. All of it." The meeting ended in silence. But as the representatives filed out into the corridor, something had changed. Fear was still there, written on every face. But there was something else too. Something that looked almost like pride. For the first time in nearly a century, humanity was going to stand up to the galaxy. And whatever happened next, they would face it together. 28 days after the first meeting, the human delegation returned to the Nexus. This time, there were more of them. Ambassador Patricia Lane walked at the front, her head held high. Beside her was Admiral Catherine Cole herself, dressed in full military uniform with metal shining on her chest. Behind them came a dozen officials from Earth's military and civilian leadership. The council chamber was just as massive as before. The 12 platforms still towered over the central floor. The representatives of ancient civilizations still looked down with expressions of superiority and mild boredom. They had done this many times before. They expected this meeting to be like all the others. They expected humanity to kneel. High Arbiter Zethvon spoke first, his translated voice echoing through the vast space. "The Galactic Council has assembled to receive Earth's response. Ambassador Lane, you may speak." Patricia stepped forward. She was aware of every eye in the room watching her. She could feel the weight of 10 billion lives resting on her shoulders. But her voice did not shake. "High Arbiter, distinguished members of the Council," she began. "The United Earth Government has reviewed your demands with all the seriousness they deserve. We have consulted with our military leaders, our scientists, our elected representatives, and our people." She paused for a moment, letting the silence build. After careful consideration, "We must respectfully decline." The chamber exploded with noise. Counselors shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. Translation devices circled to keep up with the chaos. Some representatives laughed in disbelief. Others made gestures that probably meant something rude in their cultures. Zethvon raised one long arm, and slowly the noise died down. His face had changed. The boredom was gone, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "You decline?" he repeated slowly. "Perhaps you do not understand your situation, Ambassador. The combined fleets of the Council number over 50,000 warships. Your entire species possesses fewer than 200 vessels capable of combat." Admiral Cole spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm and clear. 187, actually. But who's counting? A few council members made sounds that might have been laughter. Ambassador Krydek's mandibles clicked rapidly. "This is not a negotiation," he said. "This is not a discussion. You will comply with the Council's demands, or you will be forced to comply. The result will be the same. The only question is how much your people will suffer before you accept the truth." Patricia nodded slowly, as if considering his words. "You may be right," she said. "Your fleets are certainly impressive. Your technology is advanced beyond anything we have developed. If you choose to attack Earth, you will probably win." She paused. Probably. The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. "But before you make any final decisions," Patricia continued, "we would like to share some information with the Council." She turned to Marcus Webb, who activated a small device he had been carrying. A holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a cylinder about the size of a human arm, plain and unremarkable looking. "This," Patricia said, "is called a quantum cascade warhead. It works by creating a tear in the fabric of space-time itself. The tear expands to approximately 3 kilometers in diameter, and everything within that area simply ceases to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, erased from the universe entirely." The chamber had gone very quiet. "We currently have 4,000 of these devices deployed across human space," Patricia continued. "They are hidden in asteroids, in cargo ships, in orbital platforms. Some of them are already positioned near targets of strategic importance." She let that sink in. "We also have 612 of these devices aimed at every major population center in Council space, every capital world, every industrial hub, every seat of power represented in this chamber." Zethvin's pale blue skin had gone slightly gray. "You would not dare. Such an action would mean your own destruction." "Probably," Patricia agreed again. "But here's what you need to understand about humanity, High Arbiter." Admiral Cole stepped forward to stand beside the ambassador. "Your species achieved space travel through slow, peaceful development over millions of years. You have never faced a true threat to your existence. You have never been pushed into a corner with no way out." She looked around the chamber at the gathered representatives. "Humans are different. We spent most of our history fighting each other. We invented weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We built bombs that could end our own species. And we did it on purpose." She paused. "We have words and ideas that your translators probably cannot even express. Mutually assured destruction. Scorched earth. Pyrrhic victory." Patricia took over again. "A species willing to die rather than submit cannot be conquered, only destroyed. And if you destroy us, we will take everything you have built with us." The silence in the chamber was absolute. Not a single representative moved or spoke. "So here is our counteroffer," Patricia said. "Leave us alone. Recognize our territorial claims. Treat with us as equals. Do this, and we can begin a new relationship between our peoples. A relationship based on respect instead of fear." She looked directly at Zethvan. "Refuse, and we all burn together. Every human. Every Karathi. Every member of every species in this chamber. None of us will survive what comes next." She straightened her shoulders. "The choice is yours, High Arbiter. What is the Council's answer?" Zethvin stared at her for a long moment. His expression was impossible to read. Finally, he spoke, and his voice was different now. Quieter, more careful. "The Council will need time to deliberate." Patricia smiled politely. It was not a warm smile. "Of course. Take all the time you need. We have positioned ourselves quite comfortably." She turned to leave, then paused and looked back over her shoulder. "But I would not wait too long. Humans are not known for their patience." The delegation walked out of the chamber without looking back. Their footsteps echoed in the silence they left behind. When they reached the safety of their shuttle, Marcus finally allowed himself to breathe. "Do you think they believed us?" Patricia looked out at the massive bulk of the Nexus station, home to millions of beings who had just learned that the universe was more dangerous than they had ever imagined. "I think," she said slowly, "that they are about to find out what fear really feels like, for the first time in 10,000 years." The Council took 3 days to respond. 3 days of silence while the human delegation waited aboard their ship. watching the massive station and wondering if the next communication would be words or weapons. During those 3 days, something extraordinary happened inside the Nexus. Species that had not truly cooperated in centuries began talking to each other, not through formal channels or diplomatic protocols, but in private rooms and secure communications. They talked because they were afraid, and fear has a way of bringing even enemies together. The Karathi hegemony had ruled the council for 10,000 years. They had done so through strength and tradition. No one had ever seriously challenged their authority because no one had ever been strong enough to try. But now, for the first time, the other species were asking difficult questions. What if the humans were telling the truth? What if those weapons were real? What if attacking Earth meant the destruction of everything they had built? Ambassador Krytak was the first to break ranks. He sent a private message to Zethvan, suggesting that perhaps a diplomatic solution would be wiser than military action. Within hours, similar messages came from half the council species. When Zethvan finally addressed the human delegation again, his tone had changed completely. The arrogance was gone. The superiority had vanished. In its place was something that looked almost like respect. "The council has reconsidered its position," he said carefully. The words seemed to cause him physical pain. "We acknowledge that certain provisions of the Galactic Compact may not apply to humanity given your unique circumstances. We propose a period of diplomatic engagement to establish mutually acceptable terms of coexistence." Ambassador Patricia Lane kept her face neutral, but inside she felt a wave of relief so powerful it nearly knocked her over. "Earth is open to such discussions," she replied calmly. The months that followed changed the galaxy forever. Human diplomats became permanent fixtures on the Nexus. Trade agreements were negotiated. Cultural exchanges were organized. Scientific partnerships were proposed. For the first time in galactic history, a species had forced its way to the table through sheer determination rather than gradual acceptance. But beneath all the diplomatic politeness, something fundamental had shifted. The council species looked at humans differently now. They smiled and made small talk and pretended everything was normal. But there was something in their eyes when they thought humans were not watching. A wariness, a caution. The same look a person might give to a small animal they had just discovered was venomous. Lieutenant Commander Amy Sullivan was part of the permanent security detail aboard the diplomatic vessel that now stayed docked at the Nexus. She was 29 years old, with red hair and a quick mind. She had trained for years to protect human diplomats in dangerous situations. She had never expected to spend her days wandering the corridors of an alien space station, being stared at by beings who viewed her species with a mixture of fear and fascination. One evening, she sat in her small quarters and wrote a message to her sister back on Earth. "You would not believe this place," she wrote. "It's so big that you could fit entire cities inside it. There are species here that I don't even have words to describe. Some of them are beautiful. Some of them are terrifying. Most of them are just strange." She paused, thinking about what she wanted to say next. "They're polite to us now, almost friendly. The Karathi especially make a big show of treating us as equals. But you can see it in their eyes when they think we're not looking. They're trying to figure us out, trying to understand how a species so young and so small could stand up to them like that." She looked out her small window at the red glow of the dying star that the Nexus orbited around. "I don't think they'll ever really understand. They came from worlds of plenty. They had millions of years to develop their civilizations in peace. They never had to fight for survival against their own planet, their own climate, their own people. They don't know what it's like to be backed into a corner with no way out." She smiled slightly as she typed the last line. "We do, back on Earth. President Samuel Green addressed the United Nations General Assembly. The hall was packed with representatives from every nation. Cameras broadcast his words to billions of viewers around the world and in the colonies. Today marks a new chapter in human history, he said. Not because we avoided destruction, although we did. Not because we won a confrontation with powers far greater than ourselves, although that is also true. Today marks a new chapter because we proved something to ourselves. He looked out at the sea of faces before him. We proved that we are not defined by our limitations. We are not measured by the size of our ships or the strength of our weapons. We are measured by our courage, by our willingness to stand up for what we believe, even when the odds are against us. He paused to let his words sink in. The galaxy has learned something about humanity today. They have learned that we will not be bullied. We will not be intimidated. We will not surrender who we are in exchange for easy safety. We would rather face destruction with our dignity intact than live forever on our knees. The applause started slowly and built until it filled the entire hall. Representatives stood and cheered. Somewhere in the back, someone started singing the old anthem, and others joined in. On the Nexus, Patricia Lane watched the broadcast on a small screen in her office. Marcus Webb stood beside her, arms crossed. "Do you think it will last?" he asked. "This peace?" Patricia considered the question. "I think the Council will honor our agreement. They're too scared not to. But trust?" She shook her head. "That will take generations, maybe centuries. And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, we keep our weapons ready and our eyes open. We build our fleets. We strengthen our colonies. We make ourselves so valuable and so dangerous that no one will ever think about threatening us again." She turned off the broadcast and looked out at the stars. The galaxy knows we exist now. They know what we're capable of. From this moment forward, nothing will ever be the same. Outside her window, human ships moved through space alongside vessels from a dozen other species. It was a strange sight and a new one. But Patricia had a feeling she would be seeing a lot more of it. In the years to come, humanity had announced itself to the universe, and the universe would never forget. Admiral Grace Holloway had served in the human fleet for 30 years, but she had never fired a weapon in anger. No human had. For 2,000 years, humanity had lived in peace with the other species of the galaxy. They traded with them. They shared technology with them. They attended meetings at the Galactic Council and paid their membership fees on time. The other races called humans the quiet ones, or sometimes the patient ones. They were not warriors. They were not conquerors. They were simply neighbors who kept to themselves and caused no trouble. Grace was reviewing supply reports aboard her carrier, the Resolute Dawn, when everything changed. A communications officer, a young man named Kevin Price, looked up from his screen with a face that had gone completely white. "Admiral," he said, his voice shaking, "we are receiving emergency signals from New Eden Colony. The Vrethany Enforcement Fleet has entered orbit. They are taking children." Grace did not understand at first. The words did not make sense. Why would anyone take children? But as more reports came in, the terrible truth became clear. The Galactic Council had decided that human children were dangerous. They had voted to remove all human children between the ages of 4 and 12 from their families. The children would be taken to Council facilities for something called cultural correction. The Council believed that humans raised their young in ways that made them too aggressive, too unpredictable, too emotional. They had decided to fix this problem by raising human children themselves. On New Eden, a beautiful green world where 3 million humans lived, the nightmare was already happening. Vrethany soldiers in heavy armor marched through the streets of every city and town. They carried lists of names. They went door to door. When parents opened their doors, The soldiers pushed past them and took their children. Laura Bennett was a teacher at a small school in the colony's capital. She was 28 years old and had dedicated her life to helping children learn. When the Vrithani soldiers came to her school, she stood in front of her classroom with her arms spread wide. "You cannot have them," she said. "These are children. They have done nothing wrong." The Vrithani commander, a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms, looked at her with cold yellow eyes. His name was Overseer Kethral, and he had been chosen for this mission because he was efficient and felt no sympathy for lesser species. "Step aside, human," he said. "The council has decided. Your emotional attachment to these young ones is exactly why they must be removed. You fill their minds with dangerous ideas. You teach them to love too strongly and to fight for what they love. This must be corrected." Laura did not move. Behind her, 23 children between the ages of 6 and 11 huddled together, crying and holding each other. A little boy named Tommy clutched her leg and buried his face in her skirt. "Please," Laura begged. "Please do not do this." Kethral raised his weapon and shot her. The stun blast threw her across the room, and she hit the wall hard. She was unconscious before she hit the floor. The children screamed. The soldiers collected them like packages and carried them to the transport ships waiting. Outside, this scene repeated itself thousands of times across New Eden. Parents fought with their bare hands against armored soldiers. Mothers threw themselves over their children's bodies. Fathers attacked aliens twice their size with nothing but kitchen knives and farming tools. It did not matter. The Vrethani were too strong, too organized, too well armed. By the end of the day, 4,247 human children had been taken from New Eden alone. Similar operations happened on 12 other human colony worlds. The total number of children seized was over 40,000. The parents who resisted too strongly were killed. The ones who survived were left standing in empty streets, holding toys and blankets that still smelled like their children, screaming at a sky that had swallowed their babies whole. When the news reached Earth, the human homeworld, people could not believe it at first. There had to be a mistake. The council would never do something so cruel. But the videos were real. The crying parents were real. The empty beds in children's rooms were real. President Marcus Lane called an emergency meeting of the human government. Representatives from every colony world attended by video link. Many of them were crying. Many of them were shouting. Some sat in stunned silence, unable to process what had happened. President Lane was 54 years old. He had gray hair and kind eyes and had spent his entire career working for peace. He had believed, truly believed, that the galaxy was becoming a better place. Now he stood at the podium and looked at the faces of his people, and he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt rage. "They have taken our children," he said. His voice was quiet, but every person in the room heard him clearly. "For 2,000 years, we have been peaceful. We have followed every rule. We have signed every treaty. We have smiled at species who looked down on us, and we have turned the other cheek when they insulted us. We did this because we believed in peace. We did this because we hoped that one day they would see us as equals." He paused. The room was completely silent. "They did not see us as equals," he continued. "They saw us as weak. They saw our patience as fear. They saw our kindness as submission. And now they have stolen the most precious thing we have. They have taken our children." He looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting his words to every human being in the galaxy. "I want to speak now to the Galactic Council," he said. "I want to speak to every species that voted for this action. I want to speak to every soldier who followed these orders. You have made a terrible mistake. You thought that because we chose peace, we could not make war. You thought that because we did not fight, we could not fight. You were wrong. Admiral Grace Holloway watched the president's speech from her command chair. Around her, officers and crew members were crying openly. Some were praying. Some were simply staring at nothing, lost in shock. Her personal communicator beeped. It was a message from Fleet Command, marked with the highest priority code. She opened it and read the single line of text. Activate Protocol Omega. The fleet wakes. Grace closed her eyes for a moment. Then she stood up and addressed her crew. All hands, she said. Battle stations. The war has begun. The quiet ones were quiet no more.